The Center for Applied Animal Behavior wasn't a typical shelter. Headed by the meticulous and reserved Dr. Aris Thorne, it specialized in complex cases, dogs whose behavioral issues defied easy explanation. Aris approached every case with rigorous scientific detachment, seeking patterns, data, and logical causes. But the arrival of case number 603, a medium-sized mixed breed rescued from a shocking large-scale neglect seizure, immediately felt different. The dog, later named Cipher, presented with classic signs of severe trauma and neglect. He was profoundly shut down, huddled at the back of his temporary enclosure, avoiding all eye contact, refusing food, muscles trembling faintly. Yet, amidst the familiar signs of fear, Aris noted subtle incongruities. There was an unnerving stillness about him, a way his eyes, when glimpsed, seemed not vacant, but intensely observant, tracking the movement of light patterns on the wall or the flicker of a distant monitor with focused attention. And there was a small, unusual physical marker, faint, symmetrically placed silver flecks deep within the iris of both eyes, almost like metallic dust, something Aris hadn't encountered before. Staff members retrieving other animals from the seizure reported feeling vaguely unsettled by him, a sentiment Aris, despite her objectivity, couldn't entirely dismiss. Cipher's silence felt less like emptiness and more like a held breath, an enigma wrapped in trauma. This wasn't just another neglect case. Aris felt an immediate, disturbing intrigue, a sense that understanding this dog would require looking beyond the obvious scars. Dr. Thorne initiated her standard rehabilitation protocol for severely traumatized dogs, focusing first on creating a sense of safety and predictability. Cipher was moved to a quiet, isolated suite at the center, designed to minimize sensory input. His routine was kept deliberately simple and consistent. Food and water delivered at the same times. Quiet cleaning periods. Minimal direct interaction. Aris and her assistant, Ben, spent hours simply being present in the adjacent observation room, separated by one-way glass, meticulously documenting Cipher's behavior. He remained largely withdrawn, spending most of his time curled tightly in the most secluded corner, often facing the wall. Yet, the flashes of uncanny ability continued, baffling Aris and her team. Enrichment puzzles designed for advanced canine cognition, which should have taken days or weeks for even a bright dog to solve, Cipher would sometimes approach after hours of stillness and solve almost instantly, manipulating complex levers or sliding panels with an efficiency that suggested prior knowledge or an extraordinary level of spatial reasoning. He seemed to anticipate routine actions with unnerving accuracy. Ben noted Cipher would often subtly shift his position towards the food slot moments before the automated timer released his meal, as if perceiving the mechanism's internal workings. One incident stood out starkly. Late one evening, a critical temperature sensor in a nearby reptile habitat began to malfunction subtly, its readings fluctuating just outside the normal range but not yet triggering an alarm. Cipher, who had been seemingly asleep in his suite, suddenly stood up, went to the door connecting to the main corridor, and let out a series of low, complex whines directed towards the reptile room, a vocalization completely different from his usual silence. Minutes later, the sensor failed completely, triggering the emergency alarm. If Cipher hadn't alerted them, the temperature drop could have been fatal for the reptiles. How had he known? Standard canine hearing couldn't detect the subtle electronic malfunction at that distance. Aris documented these events rigorously, cross-referencing behavioral databases, consulting research papers on canine cognition and trauma responses. Nothing fit. Cipher's periods of deep shutdown were consistent with severe neglect, yet his flashes of high-level problem-solving and apparent heightened sensory perception seemed contradictory. He wasn't displaying the scattered anxiety or hyperreactivity common in many trauma cases. His fear seemed deep but contained, overlaid with an almost analytical awareness. Ben, witnessing Cipher flawlessly navigate a complex laser pointer path designed to test spatial memory, a test usually reserved for primates, shook his head. "It's like he's running different software, Doc," he murmured. "Traumatized, yeah, but something else is going on in that head." Aris had to agree. The puzzle of Cipher deepened, pushing the boundaries of her scientific understanding and hinting at a past far more complex than simple neglect. The key, Aris suspected, lay in the anomalies, the unique physical marker and the paradoxical behavior. She focused first on the strange silver flecks shimmering deep within Cipher's irises. High-resolution imaging revealed they weren't pigment variations but seemed to be microscopic, non-biological particles of unknown composition embedded within the eye tissue. Initial genetic sequencing confirmed Cipher was a mixed breed, primarily Belgian Malinois and Border Collie, breeds known for intelligence, but also flagged several rare, unmapped genetic markers, particularly related to neural pathways associated with sensory processing and pattern recognition. These markers weren't defects, they were simply different, statistically improbable variations. Frustrated by the lack of answers in current databases, Aris decided to investigate Cipher's origins more deeply, pushing past the minimal information provided by the initial neglect seizure report. The property where Cipher and dozens of other animals were found belonged to a holding company with deliberately obscured ownership records. However, cross-referencing property transfer records with local archives, Aris unearthed a connection. Decades ago, the remote property had housed a private research facility, officially focused on animal husbandry but rumored to be involved in more esoteric projects. The facility had been abruptly shut down years later, its records sealed or destroyed, and the name associated with its final years of operation sent a chill down Aris's spine: Dr. Elias Vance. Vance was a name whispered with a mixture of awe and condemnation in certain academic circles. A brilliant, visionary ethologist and cognitive scientist from the previous generation, his early work on animal intelligence was groundbreaking. But his later research, delving into accelerated learning, sensory enhancement, and even interspecies communication, became increasingly controversial. Funding dried up, papers were rejected by peer-reviewed journals, and rumors swirled about unorthodox methods, questionable ethics, and research that pushed boundaries too far, too fast. Vance eventually disappeared from public life entirely, becoming a recluse, his final research findings lost or deliberately suppressed. Could Cipher be a relic of Vance's controversial work, a living result of experiments in cognitive enhancement or selective breeding for heightened perception? The idea seemed outlandish, like something from science fiction. Yet, it offered a potential framework that could encompass Cipher's paradoxical combination of trauma-induced withdrawal and inexplicable abilities. Aris scoured online academic archives and obscure conference proceedings, searching for any surviving fragments of Vance's later work. She found tantalizing hints, vague references in footnotes of other papers, abstracts for presentations that were never given, mentioning canine subjects bred for complex environmental analysis or enhanced predictive modeling. One fragment spoke of attempts to develop nonverbal communication protocols using specific light and sound frequencies. It was fragmented, speculative, but it resonated disturbingly with Cipher's own baffling behaviors, his reaction to patterns, his uncanny anticipation, the strange complexity of his whines. The neglect Cipher suffered might have happened after his unique development, perhaps when Vance's program collapsed, leaving highly intelligent, possibly hypersensitive dogs abandoned and traumatized. Aris felt she was peeling back layers of a history someone had tried very hard to erase, a history inextricably linked to the silent, watchful dog in Suite 4. The possibility that Cipher was a product of Dr. Vance's controversial research, a being intentionally engineered or conditioned for heightened abilities, forced Aris to reevaluate her entire approach. If Cipher's fundamental perception of the world was different, then standard trauma rehabilitation protocols might be insufficient, even counterproductive. She needed to understand the nature of Vance's work, the specific methods he might have employed to tailor a truly effective plan for Cipher. Accessing Vance's sealed research proved impossible through official channels. Institutions cited privacy concerns, classified project details, or simply claimed the records were lost. Former colleagues of Vance were either deceased, tight-lipped, or actively warned Aris away. "Vance flew too close to the sun, Dr. Thorne," one retired professor cautioned her via email. His later work, "It blurred lines. Man wasn't meant to cross. Best let sleeping dogs lie for everyone's sake." The resistance only fueled Aris's determination. If Vance's work held the key to helping Cipher, she couldn't afford to ignore it. She shifted her focus to indirect clues, searching for anyone who might have been peripherally involved. Her persistence paid off when she located Maria Flores, a retired research librarian who had briefly worked at the private facility on Athelred Island during Vance's tenure. Initially wary, Maria eventually agreed to speak with Aris, sharing fragmented memories under strict confidentiality. She recalled Vance as brilliant but obsessive, secretive about the specifics of his canine cognition project. She remembered seeing specialized equipment, complex light arrays, sound frequency generators, intricate puzzle feeders unlike any standard enrichment devices. She recalled hushed whispers among junior staff about dogs that seemed too smart, capable of anticipating events or solving problems almost instantly. Maria hadn't seen direct evidence of abuse, but she described an atmosphere of intense pressure and secrecy, and confirmed the facility's abrupt closure and the subsequent dispersal or abandonment of the animals after funding was suddenly cut amidst ethical concerns raised by an oversight committee. "They just vanished," Maria said sadly. "The project, the dogs, like they never existed." Maria's recollections, combined with fragments from Vance's scarce public writings, gave Aris crucial insights. Vance appeared to be using operant conditioning paired with specific sensory stimuli, perhaps patterns of light pulses or complex audio frequencies, to shape cognitive pathways, potentially creating a form of specialized communication or enhancing pattern recognition. Could Cipher's strange reactions to certain visual patterns or sounds be remnants of this conditioning? Could his uncanny abilities be accessed or even managed through similar stimuli? Aris decided to test the hypothesis cautiously. Using data from Vance's hinted frequencies, she programmed simple sequences on a tablet screen displayed outside Cipher's suite. The dog, previously unresponsive to standard visual cues, immediately oriented towards the screen, his body subtly tensing, ears pricked, tracking the complex, pulsing light patterns with intense focus. When Aris introduced specific sequences of low-frequency tones hinted at in Vance's notes, Cipher responded with distinct, low whines that mirrored the tonal shifts, a potential echo of a lost language. It was a chilling breakthrough, confirming a hidden layer to Cipher's mind, a past deliberately imposed upon him before the trauma of neglect took hold. This revelation, that Cipher possessed a mind shaped by both deliberate advanced conditioning and subsequent severe trauma, presented Aris with a profound ethical and practical challenge. Standard rehabilitation focused on counter-conditioning fear responses and building trust through simple, positive associations. But Cipher wasn't standard. His baseline perception, his very way of processing information, might be fundamentally different. Ignoring his heightened cognitive abilities could hinder his recovery, leaving his intelligent mind frustrated and understimulated within a purely trauma-focused protocol. Conversely, actively engaging those abilities using methods hinted at by the controversial Dr. Vance felt like walking an ethical tightrope. Was she helping Cipher heal, or inadvertently reinforcing potentially harmful conditioning? Aris redesigned Cipher's rehabilitation plan, attempting to integrate both aspects of his complex nature. She continued the slow, patient work of building trust and desensitizing him to common triggers associated with his neglect. fear of sudden movements, resource guarding around food, anxiety in confined spaces. Simultaneously, she introduced cognitive challenges tailored to his apparent capabilities. Using advanced puzzle toys that required multi-step solutions and incorporating stimuli based on the light and sound patterns Vance seemed to have used. The goal wasn't to train him in Vance's methods, but to provide appropriate mental stimulation and potentially use these familiar patterns as a bridge for communication and positive reinforcement during trauma therapy. The results were paradoxical and fascinating. Cipher engaged readily with the complex puzzles, often solving them with startling speed, seeming to find focus and perhaps even a measure of confidence in these cognitive tasks. He showed clear recognition of the specific light and sound sequences Aris introduced, sometimes responding with subtle vocalizations or body language shifts that Aris meticulously logged, attempting to decipher their meaning. These tailored cognitive exercises seemed to provide an outlet for his active mind. Yet, his progress in overcoming the core trauma remained painfully slow. He still startled easily, remained deeply wary of close human contact, and retreated into shutdown when feeling overwhelmed. It was as if two distinct parts of him were at odds: a brilliant, hyper-aware mind capable of extraordinary feats, trapped within a body governed by the deep, primal fear born of neglect and abandonment. Ben, her assistant, watched the process with growing unease. "Doc, I get that he's smart, maybe even different." He ventured one day after witnessing Cipher solve a particularly complex sequential puzzle, but then flinched violently when Ben accidentally dropped a metal bowl nearby. "But are we sure stimulating that part of him is helpful? What if Vance messed him up in ways we can't fix? Shouldn't we just focus on making him feel safe like a normal dog?" It was the question Aris wrestled with daily. Where was the line between providing appropriate enrichment for a unique mind and potentially exacerbating underlying issues caused by Vance's unknown experiments? Finding that balance became the crux of Cipher's unique path to healing. The ethical questions surrounding Cipher's rehabilitation, combined with the frustratingly slow progress on his core trauma, pushed Aris to make one last, difficult attempt to confront the source, Dr. Elias Vance himself. Locating him required navigating layers of deliberate obscurity, but through persistent searching of property records and reaching out to estranged former associates, Aris finally found an address, a remote, off-grid cabin deep in the northern wilderness. Uncertain of what she would find, or even if Vance would speak to her, she made the long journey, armed with her documented observations, video footage of Cipher, and a slim hope for answers. She found Vance frail, elderly, and seemingly resigned, living amidst stacks of papers and complex, non-functional-looking electronic equipment. He listened impassively as Aris described Cipher, the anomalies, the cognitive abilities, the deep trauma, the hints of his past research she had uncovered. He showed no surprise, only a weary recognition. When Aris finally showed him the footage of Cipher solving the complex puzzle and responding to the light sequences, Vance sighed, a lifetime of ambition and regret etched onto his face. "Project Chimera," he murmured, the name barely audible. He confirmed Aris's suspicions. Cipher, or rather Subject C6 as he was known then, was one of several dogs selectively bred and conditioned over years for heightened sensory perception, pattern recognition, and predictive problem solving. The goal, Vance explained with a detached air, was to create biological processors capable of analyzing complex environmental data for applications, ranging from disaster prediction to resource management, perhaps even military surveillance. Though he remained vague on the ultimate intended use. He detailed the conditioning methods: complex operant conditioning, using specific light, sound frequencies as markers and reinforcers, rigorous cognitive challenges, sensory enhancement exercises. Crucially, he also confirmed the program's sudden, messy collapse, an ethical review board, alerted by internal whistleblowers, perhaps Maria Flores, shut down his funding overnight. In the chaotic aftermath, with records being seized or destroyed, Vance admitted the dogs, including Cipher, were simply abandoned at the remote facility. They were collateral damage. Vance stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Expensive, inconvenient loose ends. He showed no remorse for the neglect, only a cold frustration that his work was interrupted. He offered no solutions for Cipher's trauma, viewing it as an unfortunate but irrelevant consequence. The meeting was chilling, confirming Cipher's extraordinary origins, but also the cold callousness that led to his profound suffering. Aris finally understood the deep conflict within Cipher, a mind deliberately engineered for complex analysis and perception, now shattered by the primal terror of abandonment and neglect. His fear wasn't just a reaction to bad experiences. It was potentially amplified by his heightened senses, making the world an overwhelming, threatening place. His intelligence wasn't just a skill. It was intertwined with conditioning he couldn't understand, potentially causing confusion and anxiety. The trauma wasn't separate from his abilities. They were inextricably linked. Understanding this final piece was heartbreaking, but it provided Aris with the clarity she needed to forge a truly integrated path forward for the dog that shouldn't exist. Armed with the full, chilling truth of Cipher's origins, Aris returned to the center with a renewed, albeit heavy, sense of purpose. Understanding the complex interplay between Cipher's deliberately engineered intelligence and his profound trauma allowed her to design a truly unique rehabilitation plan, one that didn't seek to suppress his abilities, but integrated them into the healing process. The goal was no longer just to make him feel safe despite his differences, but to help him use his unique mind to navigate his fears and find confidence because of who he was. The approach was multifaceted. Aris continued the patient desensitization to environmental triggers, but now incorporated Cipher's pattern recognition skills. Instead of just playing sounds randomly, she used predictable sequences, allowing Cipher to anticipate and seemingly brace for the stimulus, giving him a sense of control. She designed puzzle feeders that required not just manipulation, but careful observation and prediction, channeling his analytical mind into rewarding, confidence-building activities. She used the light and sound sequences Vance had employed, not as conditioning tools, but as clear, consistent markers for positive reinforcement during scary situations, leveraging his past conditioning as a bridge to new, safe associations. Progress remained slow, measured in subtle shifts rather than dramatic leaps, but it became more consistent. Cipher began to show clearer signs of distinguishing between perceived threats and genuine safety. He started using his intelligence proactively. Instead of freezing when startled, he might retreat to a designated safe mat Aris had trained him to use, demonstrating learned coping mechanisms. He even began initiating communication using the methods Aris had adapted, perhaps nudging a specific light panel to signal a need, or emitting a specific low whine sequence when anxious, allowing Aris to respond appropriately. A significant breakthrough came during a routine health check. Previously requiring sedation, Cipher, guided by Aris using calm cues and familiar light patterns as reassurance signals, allowed Dr. Chen to perform a basic examination while remaining relatively calm and focused, relying on his established trust with Aris and his understanding of the predictable sequence of events. It was a profound demonstration, emotional healing and cognitive ability working together, allowing him to navigate a previously terrifying experience with newfound stability. Ben watched, amazed. "He's using his superpowers for good now, huh, Doc?" he remarked quietly. Aris smiled. It felt like a corner had truly been turned. Cipher was learning to integrate all parts of himself, the engineered and the emotional, the brilliant and the broken. Cipher's journey was never about erasing his unique past or turning him into a normal dog. It was about understanding the complex tapestry of his existence, the intersection of deliberate design, profound neglect, and innate canine resilience. His story is a compelling exploration into the mysteries of the animal mind, the enduring impact of trauma, and the crucial importance of tailoring rehabilitation to the individual's specific needs, history, and capabilities. Through meticulous investigation and profoundly patient care, Dr. Thorne didn't just heal Cipher's trauma. She helped him find a way to navigate the world as the unique being he is. Their story challenges us to look beyond labels, to appreciate the intricate inner lives of the animals we share our world with, and to recognize that healing often requires not just compassion, but a deep commitment to understanding the complete picture, however strange or complex it may be. Cipher remains an enigma, perhaps, but one who is finally safe, understood, and accepted.